My family treats me like a doormat. Now they are planning a cruise without me and assuming I'd stay behind to babysit their kids. Growing up as the youngest in my family, I always felt like I was living in everyone else's shadow. My older siblings were the achievers, the ones who got married first, had kids first, bought houses first. Me, I was just the guy who was always available when they needed something. And boy, did they need a lot. It started small when I was in college. My sister would call me crying about her relationship problems at 2 in the morning, expecting me to drop everything and listen for hours. My brother would show up at my dorm unannounced, asking me to help him move furniture or fix his car. I never said no because, well, that's what family does, right? They help each other out. After college, things only got worse. I moved back to my hometown to save money while I figured out my career path, and suddenly I became the family's go-to guy for everything. Need someone to watch the kids while you go out for date night? Call me. Need help with yard work? I'm your man. Having a family emergency and need someone to drop everything and drive 3 hours? I'll be there. The worst part wasn't even the constant requests for help. It was the way they just assumed I'd say yes. They wouldn't ask if I was free or if I had plans. They'd just tell me what they needed and when they needed it, as if my time and my life didn't matter at all. My sister had 3 kids under the age of 10, and I swear I spent more time at her house than I did at my own apartment. Every weekend, it was something. She needed to run errands, go to the gym, have lunch with friends, attend some event. And every time she'd drop the kids off at my place or expect me to come over and watch them. Don't get me wrong, I love my nieces and nephew, but it felt like I was their unpaid babysitter rather than their uncle. My brother wasn't much better. He and his wife had 2 kids and they treated me like their personal assistant. They'd ask me to pick the kids up from school when they were running late, take them to soccer practice, help with homework. Again, they never asked if I was available. They just assumed I'd be there, ready and willing to drop whatever I was doing to help them out. The breaking point should have come last Christmas when my entire family gathered at my parents' house for the holidays. I spent the entire week cooking, cleaning, watching kids, and running errands for everyone else. While my siblings sat around drinking wine and catching up, I was in the kitchen doing dishes or in the living room entertaining their children. When it came time to open presents, I got a generic gift card from each family, while they exchanged thoughtful, expensive gifts with each other. But even that wasn't enough to wake me up. I was so conditioned to being the helper, the backup plan, the reliable one, that I just accepted it as my role in the family. I told myself that this was just how families worked, that everyone had their part to play, and mine was to be the support system for everyone else. The real wake-up call came 3 months ago when my sister called me on a Tuesday afternoon. She didn't even say hello. She just launched into this excited speech about how she and my brother's family were planning this amazing 2-week cruise to the Caribbean. They'd been saving up for it for months, she said, and they'd finally booked it for next month. The kids were so excited and it was going to be the trip of a lifetime. I was genuinely happy for them. It sounded like an amazing vacation and they all deserved a break. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She asked if I could clear my schedule for those 2 weeks because they were going to need me to watch my parents during that time. My parents, who are in their 70s but still perfectly capable of taking care of themselves, apparently needed a babysitter while the rest of the family was living it up on a cruise ship. When I asked why they thought my parents needed watching, she gave me this condescending explanation about how they're getting older and it would just be safer if someone was around. But then she let slip the real reason. They wanted me to house sit my brother's place too, to make sure everything was secure while they were gone. And oh, could I also water my sister's plants and check her mail? The conversation continued, and she laid out this entire itinerary of things she needed me to do while they were gone. Pick up packages, maintain the yard, check on the neighbor's cat that they'd agreed to feed. It was like she'd created a full-time job for me while they went on vacation. But here's the thing that really got to me. Not once during this entire conversation did she ask if I wanted to come on the cruise. Not once did she mention that maybe I'd like a vacation too. It was just assumed that I'd be staying behind, ready and willing to take care of everyone's responsibilities while they had fun. I tried to play it cool during the phone call, but inside I was seething. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for hours, just staring at the wall and thinking about my life. When was the last time I'd taken a real vacation? When was the last time someone in my family had asked me what I wanted to do instead of just telling me what they needed from me? The answer was never. I couldn't remember a single time when my family had considered my wants or needs when making plans. I was always the afterthought, the backup plan, the one who would handle everything so everyone else could have their fun. That night I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to book my own cruise, not just any cruise but the exact same one my family was going on. I'd worked hard for years without taking proper time off and I had plenty of money saved up because I never spent it on myself. If they could afford a cruise, so could I. The next morning, I called the cruise line and booked a cabin on the same ship. It was one of the more expensive rooms with a balcony and everything. For the first time in years, I was doing something purely for myself, and it felt incredible. I didn't tell my family right away. I wanted to see how far they'd take their assumptions about my availability. Over the next few weeks, the requests kept coming. My sister called to ask if I could take my parents grocery shopping while she was gone because they shouldn't be driving too much. My brother sent me a list of things to check on at his house, including specific instructions for maintaining his lawn. My mom even called to thank me for being so helpful and to let me know she'd stocked the fridge with my favorite foods so I wouldn't have to worry about cooking while I was staying with them. The whole thing was surreal. They'd built this entire fantasy around my availability without ever actually confirming that I was available. They'd made plans, given people instructions, and created expectations, all based on the assumption that I had nothing better to do with my life than cater to their needs. 2 weeks before the cruise, I decided it was time to drop the bomb. I chose a Sunday family dinner at my parents' house when everyone was together and in a good mood. The conversation naturally turned to the upcoming cruise, with everyone excitedly discussing their plans and packing lists. My sister started going over the final details of what she needed me to handle while they were gone. She had this printed list of instructions that she pulled out of her purse, complete with phone numbers, schedules, and daily tasks. She was in full organization mode, delegating responsibilities and making sure I understood the importance of each task. That's when I spoke up. I told them that I wouldn't be able to help with any of those things because I'd be on the same cruise as them. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear a pin drop in that dining room. My brother was the first to speak, and he asked if I was joking. When I assured him I wasn't, the questions started flying. How long had I been planning this? Why hadn't I told them? How was I going to afford it? What about all the things they needed me to do? The last question really bothered me. Even after learning that I was taking my own vacation, their immediate concern was who was going to handle their responsibilities. Not whether I was excited about the trip, not whether I'd gotten a good deal, but who was going to water the plants and check the mail. I explained that I'd booked the cruise months ago, which was a small lie, but I wanted them to think I'd been planning this all along. I told them that I'd never actually agreed to house sit or parent sit, and that they just assumed I would be available without ever asking. The reaction was not what I'd expected. Instead of being happy that we'd all be on the same cruise together, they seemed annoyed. My sister immediately started talking about how this was supposed to be their family vacation and how my presence would change the dynamic. My brother mentioned that they'd already made dinner reservations and planned activities that didn't include me. But the comment that really stung came from my mom. She said she was disappointed in me for being so secretive and for not considering how my decision would affect everyone else. She asked how they were supposed to enjoy their vacation, knowing that their responsibilities back home weren't being handled. I felt like I was in an alternate universe. Here I was, finally doing something for myself after years of putting everyone else first, and they were making me feel guilty about it. They weren't excited that I'd be joining them on what was supposed to be an amazing family experience. They were upset that their personal assistant wouldn't be available to clean up after them while they were gone. The dinner ended awkwardly, with everyone kind of avoiding the topic and making stilted small talk about other things. But I could feel the tension in the room, and I knew this wasn't over. Over the next few days, I got individual calls from each family member. My sister tried to convince me to cancel my cruise booking and offered to pay for a different vacation for me at a later date. She said it would be better for everyone if we took separate trips, and that she'd already promised the kids they'd have special uncle time when they got back from the cruise. My brother took a different approach. He tried to make me feel guilty by talking about how much money they'd lose if they had to hire people to handle all the things I was supposed to do. He said they'd already turned down other help because they were counting on me, and now they'd have to scramble to find alternatives at the last minute. Even my parents got involved. My dad called to suggest that maybe I should consider what was best for the family as a whole. He said that while he understood my desire to take a vacation, the timing was problematic and maybe I could find a different cruise at a different time. But the call that really opened my eyes came from my sister's husband. He'd never been directly involved in the family dynamics before, but apparently my sister had put him up to calling me. He tried to approach it from a practical angle, explaining how much stress this was causing his wife and asking if there was any way we could work out a compromise. During that conversation, something clicked for me. This wasn't just about the cruise anymore. This was about years of being taken for granted, of being treated like my time and my life were less valuable than everyone else's. They weren't upset because they'd miss me on the cruise. They were upset because their backup plan had fallen through. I realized that I'd been enabling this behavior for years by always saying yes, by always being available, by never setting boundaries or standing up for myself. I trained them to treat me like a doormat, and now I was surprised when they walked all over me. So I made another decision. I wasn't going to budge on the cruise, but I also wasn't going to let this be the end of it. I was going to use this as an opportunity to reset the relationship with my family and establish some healthy boundaries. I called a family meeting for the weekend before the cruise. Everyone came, probably expecting me to announce that I'd changed my mind and would be staying home after all. Instead, I laid out some new ground rules for how our family relationships were going to work going forward. I told them that I loved them all and wanted to be part of their lives, but that I was tired of being taken for granted. I explained that from now on, they needed to ask before assuming I was available to help, and they needed to accept no as an answer without making me feel guilty about it. I also told them that I wanted to be included in family plans and decisions, not just brought in as an afterthought to handle the logistics. If they were planning family vacations or gatherings, I wanted to be part of the conversation from the beginning, not just told about it after everything was decided. The reaction was mixed. My parents seemed to understand where I was coming from and apologized for taking advantage of my good nature. My sister got defensive and said that family members should be willing to help each other without keeping score. My brother just seemed confused, like he genuinely didn't understand why this was such a big deal. But something interesting happened during that conversation. My sister's husband, the one who'd called me earlier, actually spoke up in my defense. He said that he'd been feeling uncomfortable with how much they relied on me and that he thought I was being reasonable in asking for more consideration. That support meant more to me than I could express. For years, I'd felt like I was crazy for being bothered by the family dynamics. Having someone else acknowledge that the situation wasn't fair made me feel validated in a way I hadn't expected. The cruise itself was awkward at first. My family had clearly planned activities that didn't include me, and there were definitely some tense moments when we ran into each other on the ship. But something funny happened after the first few days. We all started to relax and actually enjoy each other's company. Without the constant backdrop of me being expected to handle everyone's needs, we were able to interact as equals for the first time in years. We had dinner together a few times, went to some of the ship's shows, and even managed to have some genuine fun as a family. My nieces and nephew were excited to have me there, and it was nice to spend time with them without feeling like I was on babysitting duty. We went to the kids' club activities together, played mini golf, and I even taught my oldest nephew how to play shuffleboard. But the real breakthrough came on the second to last night of the cruise. My sister found me sitting alone on my balcony, watching the sunset over the ocean. She sat down next to me, and for the first time in years, we had a real conversation. She apologized for taking me for granted, and said that she hadn't realized how much she'd been asking of me. She explained that after her divorce a few years ago, she'd been struggling to balance everything and had gotten into the habit of relying on me too much. She said that having me on the cruise had reminded her how much she enjoyed my company when we weren't in a caretaker-care-to-key dynamic. We talked for hours that night, really talked about our lives, our dreams, our fears. It was the kind of conversation we used to have when we were younger, before life got complicated and roles got established. For the first time in years, I felt like she saw me as a person rather than just as someone who could solve her problems. The next morning, my brother approached me at breakfast. He was more awkward about it than my sister had been, but he also apologized for not considering my feelings. He said that he'd talked to his wife about it, and they both realized they'd been unfair to me. He even mentioned that they'd started making arrangements to handle their own responsibilities when they traveled, rather than just assuming I'd be available. Even my parents had a change of heart. On the last day of the cruise, my mom pulled me aside and said that she was proud of me for standing up for myself. She said that she and my dad had been talking about how they'd contributed to the problem by always praising me for being so helpful and reliable, without acknowledging that I might have my own needs and desires. The cruise ended up being one of the best vacations I'd ever taken, not just because of the destination, but because it marked a turning point in my relationship with my family. We were finally able to see each other as individuals rather than as roles we'd fallen into over the years. When we got back home, things were different. My sister started asking me in advance if I was available to watch the kids, and she accepted it gracefully when I said no. My brother stopped just showing up at my apartment expecting help and started scheduling times that worked for both of us. My parents began including me in their own social plans rather than just assuming I was available to help with theirs. It wasn't perfect right away. There were still moments when someone would fall back into old patterns, but now we had a framework for addressing it. When my sister called me at the last minute asking me to babysit, I was able to remind her of our conversation on the cruise, and she apologized and made other arrangements. The biggest change was in how I saw myself. For years, I defined my worth by how helpful I was to others, how available I was, how reliable I could be. But the cruise experience taught me that I had value beyond what I could do for other people. I had my own interests, my own dreams, my own right to make decisions about my time and my life. I started saying no more often, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I began making my own plans and sticking to them, even when family members asked me to change them. I took up hobbies that I'd been putting off for years, joined clubs, made new friends who knew me as something other than the family helper. 6 months after the cruise, my family planned another vacation, a long weekend at a lake house. This time, the conversation was different from the start. They asked if I wanted to come, what dates worked for me, what activities I'd be interested in. When I said yes, they included me in the planning process, asking for my input on everything from accommodations to meals. It was a small thing, but it represented a huge shift in how they saw me and how I saw myself. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I wasn't the person they called when they needed something handled. I was a member of the family whose presence was wanted and whose opinions mattered. The lake house trip was wonderful in a way that family gatherings hadn't been for years. We all contributed to cooking and cleaning. We made decisions together about what to do each day. When my nephew skinned his knee, my sister handled it herself instead of automatically looking to me to take care of it. Looking back now, I realize that the cruise controversy wasn't really about the cruise at all. It was about respect, boundaries, and the way families can fall into unhealthy patterns without anyone really noticing. My family wasn't malicious in how they treated me. They weren't trying to take advantage of me or make me feel bad. They'd just gotten used to a dynamic that worked for them without considering how it was affecting me. And I wasn't blameless either. I'd enabled the pattern by always saying yes, by never expressing my own needs, by accepting the role of family helper without question. I'd been so focused on being the good son, the reliable brother, the helpful uncle, that I'd forgotten to be myself. The experience taught me that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's the only way to have healthy relationships with the people you love. When you don't advocate for yourself, you end up resenting the people who care about you most, and that helps no one. Today, my relationship with my family is stronger than it's been in years. We still help each other out, but it's based on mutual respect and consideration rather than assumption and obligation. When my sister needs a babysitter, she asks politely and gives me plenty of notice. When my brother needs help with a project, he makes sure it's a good time for me and offers to return the favor. Most importantly, they include me in their lives not because they need something from me, but because they enjoy my company. We take vacations together now, real vacations where everyone contributes and everyone has fun. We have family dinners where I'm not automatically assigned to kitchen duty. We make plans that take everyone's schedule and preferences into account. The cruise that started as a source of family drama ended up being the catalyst for the healthiest relationships I've ever had with my family. Sometimes you have to rock the boat to get to calmer waters, and I'm grateful I finally found the courage to do exactly that.